All right, just to get you a little bit more familiar with creating custom services, we're going to go ahead and create one more service. And this is going to be a more traditional service that just has a method on it. And that method is going to do something useful for us. So for this, we're going to create a new page. We're going to create an edit profile page so that users can come to this site and create a profile. And it's going to look like this. Now, if you don't have the exercise files, so that you don't have to type in all this HTML, we've made this edit profile HTML file available inside the Angular fundamental files GitHub repo available here. So inside this demo app zip file, you'll see there's an app folder once you download it. And inside that app folder, there is a edit profile files folder. And inside there, you'll want to grab the files out of the original folder. So here you see the edit profile HTML file. And then there is also an edit profile controller and Gravatar URL builder that you'll want to grab for the upcoming demo. So go ahead and grab those files if you don't have the exercise files already. So in here you'll see HTML and CSS with a few Angular bindings. So you'll notice we have bindings to a user model, and take particular note of this user email address. That's what we're going to be working with in our service. And then notice that we are bound to the edit profile controller via this ng controller directive. That controller doesn't exist yet, so let's go ahead and create that. Okay, so now we have an edit profile controller. And that's going to look like this to start out with. Okay, so we just have a basic edit profile controller. It has a user model on the scope. If we go back to the edit profile page, what we're going to be working with here is this image tag that is currently pointing to the static profile JPEG image. And if you don't have the exercise files, that image is available in the GitHub repo. If we go over now to the edit profile page in our browser, this is what it looks like. So just a page that's got our blank image, and that's what we want to work on, is replacing that blank image. So let's come over to our controller. Oops, wrong controller. Our edit profile controller, and let's create a function. This is a Gravatar URL method. And again, if you don't have the exercise files, you'll want to grab this file from the demo app zip file, since it has that ugly regex and MD5 hash function in it. So go ahead and grab that now if you don't have the exercise files. So this function takes in an email address, and this is how you build a Gravatar URL. This is the URL to just kind of a generic Gravatar profile image. And what you do is you build up a URL like this. Here's the base URL. And then you need an MD5 hash of the email address, and then .jpg question mark, and then the size of the image, so 200 pixels. And the rating, you can set ratings on images, GPG, PG13, etc. So this is the format of the URL, and it does this MD5 hash. In addition, before doing all the MD5 hash and actually making a call out to the Gravatar or returning the Gravatar URL, it doesn't do any of that if the email's regex does not match a valid email address regex. By the way, this MD5 hash function is much bigger than it looks. You can see that goes on forever here. But that's a nice clean way of representing that we're just going to MD5 hash this email. So that's really all that's going on here. Nothing really important, particularly with Angular. Just know that we're building a URL from an MD5 hashed email. And if we come over to our edit profile page now, and instead of using this static image, we are going to use ng source instead of just source. And we're going to tell Angular to set the source of the image to the result of this expression, which is going to call that function on the controller that we just created, get Gravatar URL. And that's going to pass in the user email address. And remember that user email address is bound down here to the model and to this email input box. So as we type the email address in, Angular is going to reevaluate this expression. So let's go try that out. If you're not familiar with Gravatar, it's a site where you can go and you can create a Gravatar account, and you bind it to an email address, and then you set up profile images that you can use based on your email address. And a lot of sites support and use Gravatar. So now if we refresh our profile page, notice that we're getting just our generic Gravatar image here. If I inspect this, notice my ng source and my source on my image element now point to that generic Gravatar image. And that's what's being returned by that controller function. And if I come in here now and I put in a valid Gravatar email address, angularjsdemo@gmail.com. Now I've got my profile image for that account. That's the image that I set up for the profile image for this email address. So now we see that that's working fine, but it's all in the controller right now, right? So this is making our controller a little bit more messy than we like to have our controllers. And this isn't really a responsibility of a controller to be formatting a Gravatar URL. So let's take this and move it out into a service. So we're going to cut this out of here. Let's go create a new service. We'll call this a Gravatar URL builder. In here, let's create a new service by calling the factory method on our module. This is going to be the Gravatar URL builder. This is now going to return an object, and that object is going to have a build Gravatar URL method on it. And let's paste in our logic here for building that. This is going to take in an email address. So now we have this build Gravatar URL method on our Gravatar URL builder. Takes in an email address. We'll return whatever that returns. And we need to inject this into our controller. So now, if I've done this all right, I'll come over here and refresh. And this isn't rendering because I created that service, but I forgot to include that service on my page. So now, if I refresh this, there we go. Now we're getting our default Gravatar image. And if I put in my email address, there we go, it's working. And now our controller looks much cleaner, and it's just making this call to this other service. So there's another example of creating a custom service, and that illustrates how useful they can be.